Greetings, Rivers here. I thought in this story I'd tell you a little bit about my Danish grandma. Her name was Valborg Andersen Samuelson. She was a pistol. She's a great lady, and she and I, over the years, became very, very close. I was her oldest grandchild, and I spent hours and hours and hours talking with her. I loved her. I loved her accent. I liked it that she was not your prototypical grandma. She never tried to kiss you on the lips, and she had this hearty laugh that was like music to my ears. And when she laughed, you couldn't help but laugh. She said her mind, and sometimes what she said was a little unpredictable. See, sometimes she used a couple of swear words like hell and damn, but I loved my grandma. My grandma was born, it looks like she was born on June 11th, 1902 in Denmark. And then she died, let's check this out, July 25th, 1997. And I was a lucky kid because I spent a lot of time talking with her. I was a child with a lot of questions. And at first, my grandma didn't really want to answer my questions because almost all of my questions pertain to Denmark. I love Denmark. And I've been to Denmark 7 or 8 times in my life, and to me, it's my happy place. I just love Denmark. And so my grandfather, Wilford, I carry his middle name proudly, and we'll be talking about him in sometime in the future because he was a wonderful man too. He passed away in 1952. I was born in 1955, so I never met my grandfather in the flesh, but I'm pretty darn sure that he and I were good friends in both the pre-existence and then just shortly before I made the scene in 1955. And my grandmother, let's call her Momor, my Momor loved her Wilford. I never heard her say one bad thing about Wilford. And the way that she talked about Wilford was just so sweet to listen to. And it was, I think, a terrible shock when he died in 1952. He had high blood pressure and he had some heart issues. And maybe had he lived in these times, he would have lived for considerably longer. I know that my mom, June Caroline Samuelson Harris, or some of you refer to her as Mormor, she's your Mormor, or Great Mormor, that she loved her father. She loved her mother too, but I think that Valborg, my Mormor, and my mom sometimes clashed because both of them were pretty stubborn. And but at any rate, they lived in this wonderful little home that they bought, brand spanking new, 1821 South, 700 East, right on 700 East, which is one of the busiest streets in all of Salt Lake. It's just this cute home. And I spent a lot of my time as a kid going there on Sunday night dinners and stopping by if I happened to be driving downtown. And one time I was on a date where my car conked out, and I was able to somehow get my car to Momor's house, and I borrowed her Rambler Nash, I think it was. It was a funky little car, and I was able, I think my battery went out or something. But at any rate, my grandma didn't consider herself Danish, really. She considered herself an American. And she was initially not really ready to talk too much about Denmark. She thought, well, why do I need to talk about Denmark? I just came there. She came over in 1929 And the first Sunday that she was in the United States, she didn't speak a word of English, by the way. The first Sunday that she was in the United States, she met Wilford, and it was, wow, it was like love at first sight. And and they had this really wonderful marriage. They were married in, I think, 1930, and he died in 52. So do the math, 22 years. And she never remarried, never even thought about remarrying. And I never, the way that she'd talk about my grandfather, it was music to my ears and made me feel both sad and happy that they had such a wonderful marriage, but sad that that I missed my grandfather. I would have loved to have had a grandfather in my life. So I thought what I would do is tell you, I'd read my Mormore's obit, or at least parts of it, and then give you an idea of what kind of a person she was. Here goes. This was a truly remarkable woman. Valborg Andersen Samuelson, our beloved mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, peacefully passed away, surrounded by her loving family, on July 25th, 1997. This lovely woman was born on June 11th, 1902, to Niels Andersen and Caroline Amelia Jensen in Brunderslev, Denmark. Now, Brunderslev is on the Jutland Peninsula as you come up through Germany, and I've been there a couple of times, and it's just beautiful country. She reluctantly agreed to emigrate to the United States in 1929 after agreeing to, quote, give it 1 year, end quote. She met the love of her life and eternal companion, Wilford F. Samuelson, on the very first day that she arrived in Utah. Wilford and Valborg were later married in the Salt Lake Temple on January 15th, 1930. They were genuinely happy together. They were blessed with 3 daughters, Rosemary, my favorite, June Caroline, my mom, and Kathleen. Their home was a gathering place for family and friends, a home filled with good food, warm laughter, peace, and love. Wilford owned and operated Utah Engraving, a small business. Wilford and Valborg supported and helped many people, especially during the Depression. During the Depression, their home on 7th East became what's called an easy mark for panhandlers, people who were hungry and needed food. Wilford passed away on September 29th, 1952. She has borne this, quote, temporary separation of 45 years with grace, strength, and patience. For the benefit of her family and others, she has lived a wonderful sermon over the last 4 decades of trusting the Lord and enduring to the end. Surely there is a wonderful reunion taking place on the other side of the veil. With Wilford's passing, the burdens of running Utah Engraving fell on the shoulders of this plucky and capable woman. After later selling the business, she continued to work at Utah Engraving until her retirement in 1973. First and foremost, Valborg loved her family, and her family loved her. For well over 20 years, weekly Sunday dinners at Mormore's were faithfully held and attended by her family. Valborg loved the gospel of Jesus Christ and has possessed a vibrant testimony of its truthfulness since the time of her baptism in Denmark. She had an abiding and childlike faith in God, and she loved the Savior. She loved the prophets. She loved the temple. From the time she retired until she was physically unable to go to the temple, she spent as much time as possible doing temple work. She possessed a delightful Danish accent, a hearty laugh, and an angelic smile. She could charm the birds out of the trees. She was plain-spoken, fiercely loyal, a great cook, loved to travel, and intensely patriotic. More and more, you can only begin to understand how we, your family, will miss you and how much you mean to all of us. So that's what I wrote way back in 1997. So a long time ago, almost 30 years ago. What my obituary doesn't say is how much she was crushed by my grandfather's death, and it really put her in a kind of a tailspin. And she, like all Danes, she was born with a cup of coffee in her mouth, and she had a hard time extricating herself from her coffee, and then she later switched to decaf coffee. But I love the smell of coffee, mainly because whenever I went to my grandmother's home, there was a pot of coffee on the stove. We never talked about it. I duly noted as a little smug, self-righteous primary boy that maybe she was drinking coffee and maybe there were a couple of other things. I don't know if she went to church all that much for quite a long time until after she retired, she started to go to the temple with a bunch of friends in her ward. I will tell you a funny story. I think, looking back, that she probably suffered a nervous breakdown when Wilford passed away back in 1952. And she made some, not all that terrible, but some wrong decisions that were, of course, duly noted by the perfect little primary boy. There was coffee. And then I will tell you a funny story that we were visiting Mormor on a Saturday, and we knocked on the door, and I came bursting in. I loved my Mormor. And as I came bursting in, she was sitting in her chair, and she was drawing on a cigarette, which I knew as a good little primary boy was a violation of the word of wisdom. I have never seen someone put out a cigarette as quickly, and she had a very guilty, busted look on her face. She didn't apologize for it, but I just remember it was lightning quick that they put it out and put the ashtray underneath the chair. And candidly, that only happened once. And I would think that she probably knew that she was not being a great example of the word of wisdom. And I never saw her smoke again. And like I said, later in life, she became a very avid churchgoer. One other thing that I want to tell you about is that she had this wonderful photo album with these little black and white pictures that I can't even begin to tell you how many times I would sit by her on the stairs next to the chair that she always sat in when she read the newspaper or watched TV. And we would go through these black and white of differing sizes, some a little bit bigger, some quite small. And being the curious little retriever, even at a young age, I just asked her questions like, who is this? Tell me about him. What do you know about him? And my Mormor very patiently explained all of this to me. And we went through that book time and time again, especially when she was in the last, say, 5 to 10 years of her life. I loved Valborg, Andersen, Samuelson. I loved her accent, and she loved me. I knew that. And I just want you to know that, she got her act together, and she finished with a bang instead of a thud. And I am just so proud of her, and I can hardly wait to see her again. I just wanted you to know a little bit about my Mormor.